5 years after he walked out of her life, a powerful CEO stepped into a small seaside cafe, only to find a little girl staring up at him and whispering, "Daddy?" He had no idea. She was his daughter. What happened next will break your heart and heal it again. The afternoon sky was a dull gray, the kind that made the world feel heavy and quiet. Rain fell in soft sheets, drumming against the glass windows of a little cafe that sat tucked on the corner of Harbor Street, a small, warm place that smelled of cinnamon, roasted coffee beans, and the faint sweetness of freshly baked bread. Inside, a woman moved gracefully behind the counter. Her name was Chloe, a gentle soul with tired eyes and a smile that carried both warmth and a little sadness. Every movement she made spoke of quiet endurance, the way she wiped the counter, the way she arranged pastries with care, as if each detail mattered deeply. Chloe had built this cafe from nothing. 5 years ago, she arrived in this seaside town with barely enough to rent a room. The townspeople had watched her rebuild her life piece by piece. A single mother with a baby on her hip, a borrowed apron around her waist, and determination in her heart. She named the cafe Little Haven. To her, it wasn't just a place to serve coffee. It was a sanctuary, a dream born from ashes. In one corner of the cafe, a small girl sat by the window, swinging her legs over the chair, humming softly to herself. Jessica, her 4-year-old daughter, had a head full of curls and eyes as blue as the morning sea. She was drawing again, a little family of 3 smiling under a bright yellow sun. Her drawings always looked the same. A woman with long hair, a little girl, and a tall man holding both their hands. Chloe paused for a moment, glancing over at her daughter. A faint smile tugged at her lips. "Who's that, Jess?" she asked gently. Jessica looked up with an innocent grin. "That's you, Mommy, and that's me. And that's Daddy." Chloe's hand froze around the coffee pot. For a heartbeat, her chest tightened, a mix of love and ache. She forced a smile and knelt beside Jessica. "You're drawing us again, huh?" "Uh-huh," Jessica said proudly. "One day Daddy will come." "You said so," Chloe nodded softly. "Yes, baby. Maybe one day." But deep down she knew how unlikely that was. Jessica had never met her father. He was part of a past Chloe had buried beneath years of quiet work and sleepless nights. A man she once loved deeply. A man who disappeared without a word. The bell above the cafe door jingled, shaking her from her thoughts. She glanced up automatically. Another customer, she thought. Maybe someone looking to escape the rain. The door opened, letting in a rush of cold air and the sound of raindrops against the pavement. A tall man stepped inside, dressed in a dark overcoat, his shoes polished, his expression distant and weary. He looked like he didn't belong in this small town. Too refined, too polished, too lost. Chloe noticed the sharp lines of his jaw, the confidence in his stride, and yet the quiet exhaustion that hung around him like a shadow. He brushed rain off his shoulders and looked around the cafe, scanning the room as if searching for something familiar. For a moment, their eyes met, and time stilled. Her heart skipped a beat. She blinked once, twice, thinking her mind was playing tricks on her. But no, that face and those eyes, and she knew them. The same deep brown eyes she had seen in her dreams. In old photographs she never had the courage to throw away. He looked older now, sharper. His hair was a little shorter, his face more defined, but the way he carried himself was the same. Calm, self-assured, almost regal. Chloe's breath caught. The coffee cup in her hand trembled slightly. The man's gaze lingered on her, puzzled. There was a flicker of recognition. Something buried deep inside him seemed to stir. But before he could place it, the waitress approached to take his order, breaking the spell. "Just a black coffee," he said quietly, his voice deep, steady, but tired. "No sugar." Chloe quickly turned away, pretending to busy herself with the espresso machine. Her hands moved mechanically, but her mind was a storm. It couldn't be him, she thought. After all these years? After everything? She tried not to look again. But curiosity, mixed with fear and something softer, made her glance toward him. He sat by the window, the same spot Jessica always chose. He gazed out into the rain, lost in thought, unaware of the little pair of eyes watching him intently. Jessica had stopped coloring. Her small hand hovered over the page as she studied the man. She tilted her head, squinting slightly as if trying to recognize something in him. Then she whispered, barely audible, "Mommy." Chloe turned slowly. Jessica pointed. "That man. He looks like the one in your picture." Chloe froze. She didn't speak. She didn't even breathe. The picture, the one Jessica was talking about, was hidden in a small box under her bed. A photo from her university days. A photo of her and John, back when the world was still kind before life had torn them apart. "Shh, sweetheart," Chloe whispered, forcing a trembling smile. "It's just someone who looks like him." But even as she said the words, her heart knew the truth. The curve of his jaw, the way he held his cup, the little scar on his right hand. It was him. John Grant. The name alone made her chest ache. Jessica, curious and innocent, climbed down from her chair and began walking toward him. Chloe's breath caught. "Jess, wait," she said softly. But the child didn't listen. Jessica reached the man's table, standing on her toes to look up at him. The man turned, surprised, his eyes meeting the little girl's bright, unblinking gaze. "Hi," Jessica said shyly, clutching her drawing in her hand. "Are you my daddy?" The cafe went completely silent. Chloe's heart nearly stopped. The sound of a cup slipping from her hand shattered the quiet. Porcelain crashing onto the floor, coffee spilling across the tiles. Every head turned toward her, then toward the little girl. John blinked, stunned. What did you say?" Jessica held out her drawing with both hands. "Mommy said Daddy has brown eyes like you." He looked at her, confusion flickering into shock. And then his gaze shifted toward Chloe. She stood frozen behind the counter, pale as paper, tears threatening to spill. Their eyes met. And in that instant, years of silence, heartbreak, and unanswered questions hung heavy in the air. Chloe felt the room spin. The sound of rain outside faded into nothing. All she could see was him, the man who had once promised her forever, and the little girl who unknowingly carried both their hearts. John's lips parted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Chloe?" And for the first time in years, she heard him say her name again. The weight of the moment was unbearable, like time itself had paused to witness the collision of two worlds that were never meant to meet again. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Inside, in that small cafe filled with the scent of coffee and rain, Destiny had quietly walked through the door, disguised as a man who never knew he'd left a part of himself behind. The cafe had fallen into a strange, almost sacred silence. You could hear the rain whispering against the window panes and the faint ticking of the old wall clock. No one moved. No one dared to speak. Chloe stood frozen behind the counter, her hand trembling as coffee dripped from the shattered cup at her feet. Her heart was beating so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. John, the man she once loved, the man she once dreamed of growing old with, was sitting just a few feet away, staring in shock at the little girl who had called him Daddy. He looked down at Jessica, his face unreadable. For a moment he couldn't find words. Her eyes, those deep blue eyes, and looked so achingly familiar. They were her mother's, yes, but there was something else. Something in the curve of her smile, the slight tilt of her chin, reflections of himself. "Sweetheart." He began slowly, his voice rough and uncertain. "Why do you think I'm your father?" Jessica looked at him innocently, holding out her drawing again. "Because Mommy has a picture of a man who looks just like you. She said he was nice and that he loved me before I was even born." The words hit him like a punch to the chest. His throat went dry. He turned toward Chloe, searching her face for answers, for anything that could explain what was happening. Chloe's eyes glistened with tears. She wanted to speak, but the words caught somewhere between her heart and her lips. Finally, she whispered, "Jessica, honey, come here." But the little girl hesitated, glancing back at the man with curiosity. Something about him made her feel safe, as if she had known him forever. John slowly rose from his seat, his chair scraping softly against the floor. The movement startled Chloe, and she instinctively stepped back, her breath trembling. Their eyes met again, years collapsing in an instant. The cafe seemed smaller now, the air thicker, every memory flooding back at once. "Chloe," he said softly. Her name left his lips like a prayer. "It's really you," she swallowed hard, her voice fragile. "What are you doing here? I didn't know," he stammered. "I was passing through. My driver stopped for coffee. I didn't know this place was yours." Chloe gave a faint, bitter laugh. No, of course you didn't. You were always too busy with bigger things. He flinched. Her tone wasn't cruel. It was tired, worn, like someone who had learned to stop expecting too much from the world. Jessica, oblivious to the tension, tugged on Chloe's apron. Mommy, you know him. Is he really my daddy? Chloe knelt down beside her daughter, cupping her face gently. Sweetheart, she whispered, why don't you go help Aunt May in the kitchen for a bit, okay? Mommy needs to talk. Jessica nodded reluctantly and disappeared through the swinging kitchen door. Now there was nothing between them, just the heavy silence of everything left unsaid. John's gaze lingered on the door where Jessica had gone. She's mine, isn't she? He asked, his voice breaking. Chloe didn't answer. Her hands gripped the counter for strength. You shouldn't be here, John. Please, he said softly, stepping closer. Just tell me the truth. Chloe lifted her eyes to his. They were full of pain, but also something else, fear. Not of him, but of opening a wound that had taken years to heal. You left, she said quietly. You left and you never came back. You didn't write. You didn't call. I waited, John, for months. And when I finally realized you were gone, I had no one to turn to. I didn't leave you, he whispered fiercely. Chloe, I wanted to come back. My father, your father? She cut him off. You mean the man who told me I wasn't good enough for you? That I was just a girl after your money? He closed his eyes. The memory still burned. His father's voice, cold and sharp, still echoed in his mind. You're a Grant. You don't marry for love, you marry for legacy. I tried to fight him, John said. But when he sent me overseas, he made sure I couldn't reach you. Every message I sent came back. Every number I dialed was disconnected. I thought you'd moved on. Chloe's voice trembled. I didn't. I waited, John. For a year I waited. And when I found out I was pregnant, I wrote to you. I begged you to come. But there was nothing. He shook his head, disbelief filling his eyes. I never got any letters. Not one. The truth was slowly dawning on both of them. The missing pieces finally falling into place after years of silence. His father had done it. He had cut her off, buried the letters, erased her from John's life, all to protect the family's image. John ran a hand through his hair, grief washing over his face. Chloe, I swear to you, if I had known. It doesn't matter now, she interrupted softly. It's too late. She has a life. I have a life. We don't need anything from you. He looked at her, pain flickering in his eyes. And what about what I need? Chloe froze. For a brief second, she saw the boy she once knew. The one who used to sneak her coffee during finals, who dreamed of starting a company that would change lives. The man standing before her was that boy grown older, wealthier, but lonelier too. You have everything, she said quietly. Money, power, a name that opens doors. What could you possibly need from us? He smiled sadly. Maybe the one thing all that can't buy and the people I love. The words hung in the air between them. Chloe looked away, blinking back tears. Just then, the kitchen door creaked open and Jessica peeked out. Mommy, the cookies are done, she said cheerfully, waving a small tray. John turned to look at her and a faint, helpless smile touched his lips. She's beautiful, he said quietly. Just like you. Chloe's throat tightened. She didn't trust herself to speak, so she simply nodded. Jessica ran over, holding the tray up proudly. I made these. Want one, mister? John knelt down, his eyes soft. I'd love one, he said, taking a cookie. Thank you, sweetheart. Jessica giggled and ran back to the kitchen. Chloe watched the scene unfold, her heart torn between the pain of the past and the fragile hope she wished she could ignore. When John stood again, his expression had changed, determined, steady. Chloe, he said, I know you don't owe me anything, but please, let me stay for a while. Let me get to know her. Let me make this right. Chloe hesitated. Her instincts told her to say no, to protect the quiet, simple life she had built. But another part of her, the part that still believed in second chances, wavered. She finally sighed. Fine, she said softly. You can come by sometimes for her. Not for me. John nodded, his eyes glistening. For her, he agreed. But as he left the cafe that day, stepping back into the rain, both of them knew. Nothing about this was simple anymore. Outside, thunder rolled again, but beneath the storm, something gentle stirred, a small flicker of hope, faint but alive. The kind of hope that only love and time could test, long before the rain, before the café, before the world hardened around her. There was laughter. Chloe still remembered those days like a movie she had watched too many times but could never forget. The university campus was alive with spring. Students sprawled across green lawns, notebooks open, coffee cups balanced on backpacks, and there, under the shade of a maple tree, sat John Grant, the son of a man who owned half the city, the heir to a name that meant money, power, and expectations. But that day, he wasn't a Grant, he was just John, a 22-year-old dreamer with a crooked smile and a sketchbook full of impossible ideas. He was building something. Grant Technologies, a startup he swore would change how people connected. Chloe had noticed him long before he noticed her. She worked in the campus library part-time, shelving books and quietly scribbling notes for her architecture classes. She was a scholarship student, quiet but fiercely independent, the kind of girl who believed in hard work and late nights over luck and inheritance. Their first meeting wasn't romantic. It was awkward, messy, and utterly unforgettable. John had tripped while running to class, spilling an entire cup of coffee on the floor near the library entrance, and on Chloe's shoes. "Oh no. Oh, I'm so sorry," he stammered, trying to help her wipe the mess with a napkin that only made it worse. Chloe looked at him, half annoyed, half amused. "You should pay more attention to where you're going." "I was, thinking about coding," he admitted sheepishly. She raised an eyebrow. "Maybe think less and walk more." He laughed, and for the first time, Chloe smiled back. That was the start. Coffee spills turned into shared lunches. Shared lunches turned into study sessions. Study sessions turned into nights spent talking on the campus steps about everything: the future, their fears, the world they wanted to build together. John was fascinated by Chloe's determination. "You don't see limits, do you?" he once told her. She shrugged. "When you grow up with none of the things people take for granted, you learn to build your own." He never forgot that line. Their love grew quietly, without grand gestures or luxury dinners. It was built on small things, handwritten notes left on desks, the way he'd walk her home after her night shift, the way she'd bring him soup when he forgot to eat. But even the purest love can be tested by the world around it. John's father, Edward Grant, was a man of reputation and control. When he first met Chloe, he saw not a young woman in love, but a threat to his family's image. "She's not one of us," Edward said coldly. "She'll ruin you, son," John had argued. He had shouted, "I love her, father. Isn't that enough?" But love was never enough for Edward Grant. Within weeks, he arranged for John to take over a branch of the company overseas. "Just a few months," he said. "You'll thank me later." Chloe had cried the night John told her. "You're leaving?" "I'll come back," he promised, cupping her face. "It's only temporary. You'll see. I'll make something of myself, and then no one can tell us we don't belong together." She believed him. How could she not? For months they wrote to each other, long letters filled with longing and hope. But slowly the replies stopped coming. 1 week passed, then 2, then a month. Chloe sent another letter and another and another. None came back. She tried calling. His number had changed. She reached out to his office, but they said he was unavailable. At first she thought maybe he was busy. Then she thought maybe he had forgotten her. Eventually she stopped wondering and started surviving. Then one morning she felt the faintest flutter beneath her ribs. A new heartbeat, a new life. Chloe sat on her small bed, clutching the pregnancy test in her shaking hands, tears streaming down her face. She whispered his name, "John." But the only reply was silence. The following months were a blur of fear and determination. She sold what little she had, found a quiet town by the coast, and started working in a bakery. Her belly grew, and so did her courage. When Jessica was born, Chloe held her close and whispered, "You may not have a father, my love, but you will never be without love." Still, there were nights when the ache was unbearable, when she'd sit by the window rocking her baby to sleep, whispering stories about the man who had once promised forever. She kept one photograph, the two of them at a university fair, laughing at something only they understood. She hid it in a small wooden box, along with all the letters she had written but never sent. Years passed. The world moved on. John Grant became a name in magazines, youngest CEO in the tech industry. Forbes 30 under 30, the visionary behind Grant Technologies. Chloe saw his face once on a news site. He was standing beside his father, shaking hands with investors. His smile was the same, but his eyes looked colder. She closed the laptop and whispered, "You did make something of yourself, John." She never tried to contact him again. She built her cafe instead, a small, warm place where people came not just for coffee but for comfort. It was her new dream, her safe space. And Jessica grew up in that cafe, surrounded by laughter, kindness, and stories of a father she had never met. "Mommy, where's Daddy now?" she'd ask sometimes. Chloe would smile softly, somewhere far away doing big things. "But he loved you very much, sweetheart. You were his dream before you were even born." She said it so often that over time she almost believed it herself. But deep down she carried one question that never left her. Did he forget us? Or did life simply tear us apart? Now standing in the cafe years later, watching John hold the same coffee cup she once handed him in that library, Chloe realized something painful and beautiful all at once. The past never truly disappears. It hides quietly in the corners of our hearts, waiting for a moment, a face, a single word, to wake it again, and that moment had just arrived. Outside, the rain began to ease. The clouds thinned and a faint light broke through. In that dim cafe, two souls stood on opposite sides of the same story. One built from regret, the other from survival. John looked through the window, his reflection ghosted beside hers. In his eyes was everything unspoken. "I never meant to leave." In hers was the reply, "But you did." Neither spoke. The clock ticked. The rain fell softly, and somewhere in the kitchen, little Jessica laughed, the sound pure and bright, cutting through the heaviness of the moment. It was the kind of sound that reminded both of them that even the most broken stories could still find a reason to hope. The sky that evening turned the color of ashes. The rain had stopped, but the streets glistened with puddles reflecting the flickering cafe lights. Inside Little Haven, the smell of coffee mingled with something else, tension and unspoken words. After closing, Chloe moved silently, wiping tables that were already spotless. The last customers had gone, leaving behind the faint echo of conversation. In the corner, John still sat with a cup of untouched coffee, staring at the dark liquid as if it could explain the years between them. She could feel his gaze following her. Each time she turned away, her heart thudded harder, because she knew a conversation was coming, the one she had avoided for 5 years. Finally, she broke the silence. "It's late, John. I should close up." He stood, his voice quiet. "I'll help. You don't have to. I want to," she sighed. "Suit yourself." They worked in silence, side by side. The clinking of dishes was the only sound between them. The closeness was unbearable, too familiar, too foreign all at once. When the last chair was stacked, John finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell me?" Chloe froze, her back to him. "I tried," she said softly. "You were gone." No one answered. And then one day I realized. I was alone. He took a step closer. "Chloe, my father—" "I know," she cut in sharply, turning to face him. "Your father didn't approve. He made sure to erase me from your life. But you didn't even fight for us, did you?" His jaw tightened. "You think I didn't?" "He sent me away, controlled everything I did, everyone I saw. I was trapped," she gave a bitter laugh. "Trapped? In mansions and private jets? You always had choices, John." "I didn't." He looked at her, guilt in his eyes. "You're right. I should have done more." Her voice cracked. "You should have come back." That silence again, heavy, suffocating, filled with everything neither knew how to say. Finally, Chloe rubbed her temples. "I don't want to do this. It's too late." But before John could answer, a small sound interrupted them. A faint, fragile cough from the back room. Chloe's head snapped up. "Jessica." She rushed to the doorway. Jessica sat up in her small bed behind the cafe, her cheeks flushed, her body trembling. "Mommy, I feel dizzy," the little girl whispered. Chloe's heart dropped. She touched Jessica's forehead, burning hot. Panic flared through her chest. "Oh no, sweetheart. You're burning up." Without hesitation, John was at her side. "What's wrong?" "She's got a fever." A bad one? The clinic's closed at this hour. Then we'll go to the hospital, he said firmly. Chloe looked out at the storm beginning to gather again. It's miles away. I don't have a car. I do. He didn't wait for her answer. He scooped Jessica up gently into his arms. Come on. Chloe hesitated only a moment before grabbing her coat and following. Outside, thunder rolled. Rain poured again, heavier this time, washing the streets in silver. John ran through it, shielding Jessica with his jacket. The wind bit at his face, but he didn't stop. Inside the car, Chloe held her daughter close as John drove through the storm, his hands gripping the wheel, knuckles white. Every red light felt like a lifetime. Please hang on, sweetheart, Chloe whispered, brushing the child's hair from her damp forehead. John's voice broke softly. She'll be okay. She has to be. When they finally reached the hospital, John didn't wait for the nurse to help. He carried Jessica straight inside. She has a high fever, he said breathlessly. Please help her. The doctors took Jessica into a room. Chloe stood in the hallway, shaking, her clothes soaked through. John placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She's strong, he said, just like her mother. She wanted to thank him, but words wouldn't come. She just nodded, her lips trembling. Minutes turned into hours. The storm outside raged on. The two of them sat side by side in the waiting area, dripping, silent and scared. Finally, the doctor appeared. She'll be fine. Just a viral fever. She needs rest and fluids. Chloe let out a shaky breath of relief, her shoulders slumping. John closed his eyes, whispering, Thank God. When they were allowed in, Jessica lay asleep on the hospital bed, her small hand clutching a stuffed bunny. The sight of her made something inside John shatter completely. He sat beside her, gently taking her tiny hand into his. I missed so much, he whispered. Chloe watched him. This man she thought she'd forgotten. There was no trace of the arrogant CEO she'd seen in magazines. This was the man she once knew. Humble, kind, terrified of losing what really mattered. You didn't have to stay, she murmured. He looked up, eyes glistening. I lost you once. I'm not leaving again. For a long while they said nothing. The rain against the hospital window sounded like a heartbeat. Steady, soft, forgiving. When Jessica stirred, half asleep, she mumbled, Daddy? John froze, then smiled gently. Yes, sweetheart. I'm here. Chloe's tears finally fell, not from pain, but from the fragile, impossible hope she had buried for years. As dawn approached, the storm began to fade. The first light of morning seeped into the room, painting everything gold. Jessica slept peacefully, her fever gone. Chloe stood by the window watching the sunrise. John came beside her, his voice quiet. I know I can't undo the past, he said, but if you let me, I want to be part of her life. Of your life. Whatever you'll allow. She looked at him weary but softened. You think it's that easy? He shook his head. No, but I'm willing to earn it. She studied him for a moment, searching his eyes for the truth. This time she saw no lies. Finally she sighed. Let's just take one day at a time. He smiled faintly. One day at a time? They turned back to Jessica, her small face peaceful under the morning light. Chloe felt something shift inside her. Not full forgiveness yet, but the beginning of it. The kind that starts quietly like a seed in the dark waiting for the sun. Outside, the clouds finally broke apart. The world was washed clean, and for the first time in years, K1 didn't feel alone. The days that followed felt different, softer somehow. The morning light that once poured into the cafe now carried a quiet warmth, the kind that filled empty spaces without saying a word. Chloe still woke early as she always did. But now when she stepped into the kitchen, she would sometimes find John already there, sleeves rolled up, apron on, trying to master the art of making coffee. He wasn't good at it. The first few cups were always either too strong or too sweet. But every time he tried, he smiled, and Chloe couldn't help but laugh. It was the kind of laughter she hadn't heard from herself in years, the kind that didn't feel heavy or forced. Jessica adored him. Each morning she would run into the cafe shouting, "Daddy's making pancakes again," as if it were the most magical thing in the world. She would sit on the counter and hand him ingredients, her small hands dusted in flour, her giggles echoing through the quiet cafe. Customers began to notice the change too. There was a new lightness in Chloe's eyes, a warmth that hadn't been there before. The cafe felt alive, not just with coffee and chatter, but with something deeper, something like healing. John spent less time in boardrooms and more time in that small seaside cafe. The man who once chased deadlines now chased moments of laughter, of shared meals, of bedtime stories. He began helping with repairs, fixing leaky faucets and creaky chairs. His expensive watches now replaced with calloused hands and the scent of coffee beans. One afternoon, when the cafe was quiet, John asked softly, "Do you ever think we could start over?" Chloe looked at him thoughtfully, her hands wiping the counter. "You can't rebuild something on broken pieces," she said, then smiled faintly. "But maybe you can build something new." He nodded slowly. "Then let me build it when with you." The silence that followed wasn't awkward this time. It was peaceful, filled with mutual understanding, the kind that doesn't need promises or apologies, just presence. Weeks turned into months. Life didn't become perfect overnight, but it became real, filled with burnt pancakes, laughter, and little drawings Jessica pinned behind the counter. Then one morning, before sunrise, Chloe entered the cafe and found John waiting by the window. The air smelled of fresh roses and cinnamon. He turned, holding a small velvet box in his hand. "Chloe," he said quietly, "I've spent years chasing everything that didn't matter, but the only thing I ever truly wanted was already here." Her eyes widened as he knelt, his voice trembling. "I don't want to fix the past. I just want to build a future with you and with her." Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. Jessica peeked out from behind the counter, her little face glowing. "Does this mean we're a family now?" she asked. Chloe smiled, wiping her tears. "Yes, baby. We're finally home." Outside, the sun rose over the ocean, spilling gold across the cafe windows. Inside, 3 hearts, and once broken, now whole, sat together, letting kindness, forgiveness, and love fill the spaces where silence once lived. Life has a way of bringing people back, not through chance, but through destiny. This story reminds us that love can survive distance, silence, and even time itself, if we choose to forgive. If this story touched your heart, don't just move on, hit the hype button, like, and subscribe for more emotional stories that will warm your heart and stir your soul. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell. Kind, because the next story might just be the one that changes the way you see love forever. Stay kind, stay hopeful, and remember, in every ending can be a beautiful beginning.